Alright, welcome back. So glad you're here today. This video is going to walk you through some ideas from a paper that I published as in the end of November of 2024, November 24. So depends on when you're watching this, how long ago that was, but it was in the European Journal for the Study of Thomas Aquinas. It's available online, and the paper is called, the title is The Logic of the Identity of Being and Goodness and a Moral Argument for Theism. And this paper kind of has a first part and a second part. In the first part, I try and walk through what I'm calling Aquinas' 4 ways to good. Of course, Aquinas' famous 5 ways to God, and I think he's got 4 ways to good. And I borrow these 4 ways from an article, book chapter by Eleanor Stump and Norman Kreitzman called On Being and Goodness, in a book edited by, I think it's Scott McDonald a few years ago, on the same topic of being and goodness. So in the first part of the paper, I try and sketch out Aquinas' 4 arguments for the identity of being and goodness, and then I turn and apply that to a moral argument for theism. So I think I'll read the introduction part and then mention the 4 ways, and then get right into the way in which Aquinas' Metaethics, his identity of being and goodness, connect directly to you might call the moral argument for theism. So Aquinas' Metaphysics and his Metaethics, his account of goodness, are intimately connected. It's true that the act of the discovery that being is esse, or being in act, or the exemplification of an essential nature, or as I call in my book, The Heresy of Heresies, essential exemplification. That is, according to George Coubertin, the moment of the discovery of metaphysics. We can also say that the discovery that being and good are identical is the discovery of metaethics. In several places in both the Summa Theologica and the Summa Contra Gentiles, Aquinas argues to the conclusion that being and goodness are identical in things, idem secundum rem, but differ in idea, different secundum rationem. This claim is not merely an interesting appendage to Aquinas' metaphysics, but rather it's an important fact not only for metaethics, theoretical ethics, and applied ethics, but also to any areas of philosophy that deal with ethics and morality, including arguments for theism. In this article, there will be 4 sections which are built on one another. In section 1, I argue the logical validity of 4 versions of Aquinas' arguments to this conclusion that being and good are identical. It's presented again by Stump and Kreitzman. Using Aquinas' own words, I'll formalize the arguments in order to make their validity logically explicit. Then in the second section, I illustrate how the conclusion from Aquinas' arguments that being and good are identical in reality entails a formal reality, the identity of being and goodness. That's going to be a formal reality that's entailed by his arguments. I show how this formal reality grounds moral arguments for theism. In section 3, then I consider the application of this formal reality to a simplified contemporary moral argument from theism, borrowing from William Craig on this one. And then I argue that Aquinas' arguments for the identity of being good should play a vital role in moral arguments for theism to militate against atheistic objections to them. Okay. So this first section, I think maybe this video I'll just briefly say something about these 4 ways, and then in the next couple videos I will try to show how these apply to the moral argument and implications that flow from it. So Aquinas has at least 4 distinct arguments for his view that being and good are identical in things and distinguishable in our minds. Let's call these arguments Aquinas' 4 ways to good, following his famous 5 ways to God. So in this section of my paper, I will look at Eleanor Stump and Norman Kreitzman's summaries of these arguments, along with the text from Aquinas' writings. Specifically, I'll look at the arguments for logical validity, since each of these arguments are formal deductions. I'll show that these arguments are deductively valid syllogisms. If you don't know what a syllogism is, Google it or ask your favorite AI. Before we look at the details, but an AI won't tell you what it's like to experience a syllogism. If you don't know what that's like, you don't know what a syllogism is, in my opinion. Before we look at the details of each argument, here are some general descriptions of Aquinas' 4 ways to good. The first way is an argument from desire, or appetent in Latin, or theete in Greek, and its conclusion is that being and goodness are really the same. The second way is an argument from corruption resistance, and its conclusion is good and being are identical. The third way is an argument from essential teleology to the conclusion that all final goods are fully actualized being. The fourth way is an argument from aiming at being and concludes that all being is good. So let me go ahead and start in on the first argument and show the validity and the soundness of these arguments in turn. So I think this video will just work on the first way, and then leave the other couple ways for other videos. I feel like I've covered this in another video or two, but it's all right. It's worth repeating. So the first way, an argument from desire, appetent, or theete. The clearest argument for the real identity of being and goodness occurs in the Summa Theologica, where Aquinas writes the following. The essence of goodness consists in this, that it is in some way desirable. Hence the philosopher, Aristotle, says that goodness is what all desire. Now it's clear that a thing is desirable only insofar as it is perfect, for all desire their own perfection, but everything is perfect so far as it is actual. Therefore, it is clear that a thing is perfect so far as it exists, for it is existence that makes all things actual, as is clear from the foregoing. He cites some passages above that section of the Summa. Hence, it is clear that goodness and being are the same really, but goodness presents the aspect of desirableness which being does not present. So, end quote. This conclusion of Aquinas' argument here is a strong identity claim. Goodness and being are the same really. Identity claims pose unique challenges in logical relations, especially when using categorical Aristotelian logic. Identity relations and statements expressing these relations have to be clearly distinguished from other non-identity statements which may appear similar to them. For example, if I claim that all dogs are mammals, and all being are good, or all goodness is being, or all things that have being are good, but I put it in a categorical structure, all S or P, S stands for subject and P stands for predicate. If I put the statements in those terms, there's a question if I'm just talking about category overlap, or if I'm talking about strict identity. Two things are really identical. Statements 1 and 2, all dogs are mammal, and 2, all being are good, as linguistic expressions look remarkably similar when they use the English word is. Further, in categorical logic, each expression would be translated into a formal Aristotelian logical statement as a universal affirmative expression of this type, all A or B, or all S or P, where A and B stand for the subject and predicate terms. So it seems to me that when you do that, there's a logical precision of Aquinas' arguments needs to be made clear. When Aquinas says that in things, ad rem, all being are good, he doesn't mean a statement like the first statement above. Here's why. There's a logical operation in Aristotelian categorical logic called conversion. Conversion is the operation of switching the subject and predicate terms and then examining the new statement for the same logical meaning. If you need help with this, look at any basic categorical logic textbook. I'm thinking of Copleston. Oh, good grief. Concise Introduction to Logic is the book that I've used over the years. I can't remember the guy's name. He's at USD for years. Anyway, you just look it up. So the operation of conversion, unfortunately, in Aristotelian logic, universal affirmative logical expressions of an A type, all S or P or all A or B, when the operation of conversion applies to them, they're not logically equivalent. Right? So you can just see this in a simple example. If I said all mammals are dogs, the converse of all mammals are dogs or all dogs are mammals. Now, all dogs are mammals is obviously true, but its converse, all mammals are dogs, is clearly false. So any operation of the conversion of an A-type categorical statement, all A or B, will necessarily be invalid, not truth-preserving, and therefore unreasonable. So logicians call this the fallacy of illicit conversion. I've always thought that fallacy sounds like something that someone tried to change religions but did it in the wrong way. Sorry, you're not in this religion officially because you committed the fallacy of illicit conversion. Like you didn't convert correctly. Anyway, maybe that's not very funny, but sometimes you need a dad joke in there. Right, so any argument relying on such a move would therefore also be invalid. So we have a puzzle. Doesn't Aquinas maintain an invalid conversion of an A-type categorical statement in his argument for the identity of being good in things? If Aquinas maintains the proposition that all being are good, he can't infer from that to the conclusion that all good are being without committing the fallacy of illicit conversion. This truly would be unfortunate if Aquinas' argument rested on such a logical mistake. However, this is where I think this is helpful in thinking about this argument from this passage. Aquinas' claim that all being are good is not merely a categorical claim, like the claim all dogs are mammals. It's an identity claim. The R is that a verb of to be is an identity. It's an is of identity, not just an is of predication or an is of categorical relation or an is of essential predication or whatever. It's an identity claim between being and good. This means that since the two terms are identical in what they refer to, they can be swapped via the operation of conversion without losing any logical equivalence. This, of course, cannot be done with non-identity claims like all dogs are mammals, so as we've seen above. So it appears that in a statement all A or B, if A and B are identical, then the conversion of all A or B to all B or A would be logically equivalent, and there would be no fallacious inference. However, the drawback from such a logical move is that it looks like it's question begging. Always an unfortunate move in any logical argument. After all, if we're trying to prove that all being good and all good being are identical claims, then to merely assert that all being good is an identity claim, and then assert that it can be validly converted would avoid the fallacy of illicit conversion at the expense of making our argument question begging. What is particularly interesting in this passage from Aquinas is that Aquinas does not make this move in the text from the Summa. Aquinas does not stipulate that all being good as an identity claim and then show that the converse claim is logically equivalent in a question-begging way. Instead, Aquinas' argument is much more robust. However, its robustness, much of the argument appears anthememic. There are assumed premises which the reader is expected to see, and without them being made explicit in the text of the argument. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. Anthememic arguments are hard to follow sometimes, or you have to kind of parse them out. So let me, what I want to do in the rest of this, and maybe I'll do a separate video on this, is look at the explicit and implicit logic in the passage to see how Aquinas reasons the strong identity claim that being and goodness are identical in things. In order to get the strong identity claim, it seems that two distinct but combined arguments are needed for the conclusion that goodness is being and being is goodness. So in what follows, I'll make explicit what these two distinct arguments are, each of which is a combination of three syllogisms. In order to make the arguments clearer, I'll use key and then lay out that key and then parse the arguments out. Okay, I think I'll do another video on that, but for now, what I want you to know is that if you're going to make an argument, a moral argument for theism, in other words, the moral argument, I don't think there's just one, there's a series of these. There's a nice little book on this topic. It's just called The Moral Argument of History. David Baggett, I can't remember how to pronounce his name, and one other author, Jerry Walls, maybe? I gotta look. But I think it's called The History of the Moral Argument, and it's a really good book. Highly recommend it. I think it's fair to say that any moral argument needs to have a metaethic behind it, and rooted in a deep metaphysics that undergirds the metaethics. And that's exactly what Aquinas provides. And so contemporary moral arguments need to take that into consideration. I don't think any moral argument will work without it, without a robust metaethics undergirded by robust metaphysics and a clear account of how the metaphysics informs the metaethics and how the metaethics informs then the moral argument that's being made. Okay, so that's kind of where this video series will take you, will take us. Thanks for watching.
Stay psyched, Grom. You.